Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. I'll blow your ears off by the time this gathering is over. It is so awesome to be here. I usually say it's great to be here anywhere but Washington, D.C., which I mean wholeheartedly, but I mean the first part as well. It's great to be back in Connecticut. What a beautiful state. It was, my work here was about 5 years, and I had the best time ever. So don't tell anybody anywhere else, but I loved it dearly, and I learned a lot. Well, first of all, let me thank Sister Audette for inviting me. Let me thank Sister Lindora for making me come, because they were very persistent, I have to say. And as a person who grew up with a parochial school education, I knew the minute they said sister, they had me. That was it. I knew I was going to get here one way or another, and it is great to be here. And I'm excited about Mercy Ecology and all that you do here, because I think we all know, as human beings, we live in a world that is really dependent on ours to fix it and keep it and preserve it. It is not just a science exercise, it is in fact a moral obligation. And so that's what's fun to be here with, I think, people who share my views of the world and who can really help us work together to bridge gaps. To stop making the issues that are important to all of us a partisan issue instead of a moral issue. And if we can sort of get together and bridge that gap and come together as a country, I think we can make great things happen again, and that's really what we need to do. So I should begin first by saying that I'm actually not a scientist. So don't think I'm going to show you charts and graphs. It flips everybody out at Harvard when they ask me to do a lecture and they say, well, where are your slides? I say, I don't have slides. I actually just talk. Because I really think that as a person who has done government work for the past 35, 37, 38 years, I haven't worked as a scientist, I've worked as a policy person. That's what I've always done. But as a policy person, it's really important to listen to the science. It's really important to understand what the law tells you to do and what the law requires you to do. And it's really important for you to listen to human beings. Because let's not forget, the United States is a democracy. We actually run by people's choices, not individual choices. And so for me, I listened to the science, I paid attention to the law, and I did everything humanly possible to reach out to people across this country before any decision was made. And I'm proud of that, and I know that that's what it takes to do the work that we do. So I know that first and foremost, science matters. Science is not a belief system. It is as close to fact as we can get. And the more you work in government, the more you realize the truth of Carl Sagan's statement when he said we live in a society exquisitely dependent on science and technology, in which hardly anyone knows anything about science and technology. So the most important thing is that we speak clearly about it. We talk about it, we get together and discuss what's going on in our world, because science is the way we've made sense of our world. It's identified the challenges that we face, and it has also brought us incredible solutions to those challenges. And so I am desperately going around trying to dumb down the science, make people understand that this is no more complicated than what your eyes can see and feel and touch. And we do have problems today, and we have to do what we've done every single year that this country has been around, which is to admit them, to grab onto them, and to fix them. This is where we are today. We have challenges today, and we know we have to move together. We have a physical world that is struggling. It's struggling to keep up with the pace of our humanity. And we have to recognize that we have limitations, and we have to live within them. That's the only challenge, frankly, that we face, is thinking that we can work our way out of limitations in our natural world, when in fact we have to live within them. I left DC, as Sister Audette explained, and I went to Harvard. Now, one of the reasons I went there, I will readily admit, is I only live about a mile from here, so it's really fun to go to. I had been traveling so much that I'm like, oh goody, I can be home. But I went to the School of Public Health, and I just want to explain this because I think people don't realize this. I have worked for so-called environmental agencies all of my life. And every single one of those agencies has been at its essence not about birds and bunnies, although I love birds and bunnies. I actually protected people. The Environmental Protection Agency is not an environmental agency. It's a public health agency. It's trying to figure out how you manage environmental resources in a way that allows human beings not just to be healthy, but to thrive. That is the goal. We never counted birds and bunnies. We counted kids with asthma attacks. We counted kids that had premature death because of exposure to pollution. That is what I've done with my life. And if you think climate is more complex than that, in some ways it is, but in other ways it's nothing more than a pollutant. It's carbon pollution. Face it. Deal with it. We're challenging our natural world. We have to take action to fix it. And that is what today is all about. So I go around everywhere talking to people and trying to tell them not to make life more complicated than it already is. Face reality. Look at the science we have. Look at the solutions available to us today and make it happen. We have to take action together. And so all my life, I have never, ever seen environmental work as being partisan in any way. If I had, I never would have gotten a job in Connecticut because I worked for a Republican, Joni Rell, and she kicked butt when it came to environmental work because she cared about this work. She was the one governor who was Republican who moved forward on the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which was the first cap and trade program to address climate change in this country. She was the deciding vote. Why? She was a woman. What else would you expect? It's a partisan crowd in that regard. And I kind of remember because I don't know if you realize it, but we're going into the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And if you remember in the early days, let's take it early, the biggest conservationists and environmentalists were Republicans. Were they not? Didn't Teddy Roosevelt start the national park system? Wasn't he the one that realized that in order to feed our souls, we need to be outside and run around and have beautiful places that inspire us and give us the awe that natural world should give us? Didn't we have the best president in the United States start up the EPA? Do we know who that was?
Richard Nixon.
Richard Nixon! Not such a good president, but he did that one thing. We actually had George H.W. Bush, I should say. He actually started up the effort to move forward with the Clean Air Act of 1990, the amendments. And the reason why he did that was because he saw that the Republicans had drifted too far under President Reagan to try to change the environmental protections we had, and he dove into that, and as a result, we had a law that we used during the Obama administration as the reason why we had to, and the reason why we did regulate carbon pollution. So life was great when we actually worked together. And the real challenge we face is to just do that again. Not as parties, but as individuals, as communities, as one world, as humanity, because nothing less is at stake these days. So all this stuff really matters. And the challenge that I think we face is that on the first Earth Day, it was very easy to see the pollution that was challenging us. You couldn't go around and not see the black smoke. You couldn't go around and not realize that rivers are not supposed to be burning because they have chemicals in them like the Cuyahoga River. And the challenge we have today is to remind people that we still have problems. That's what science is telling us. We can't deny them and pretend we're not facing them. That's not what we do in this country. We jump on them and we lead in terms of solutions. And right now there are still huge amounts of people across the world and in the US that are facing health challenges because of pollution. We have work to do. We need to go about and get that work done. Right now globally, 16% of the deaths that we see, the premature deaths, are a result of exposure to pollution. 9 million people die every year as a result of exposure to pollution. 7 million of them because of lousy air. 7 million. And most of those folks are in low and middle income countries. 92 to 93%. So if you think pollution is an equal opportunity killer, you're wrong. It is going after the young, it is going after the poor. That is why it is a moral issue. Not just because we have to protect God's resources, but we have to speak up for the least of us, those who are most vulnerable. And if we do not, then they will continue to feel the brunt of the pollution that the developed world has thrust upon them. And we have to figure out how to deal with these issues. WHO just put out a report recently that said that 1 out of 4 deaths in kids under the age of 5 is actually attributable to pollution, because we know they're so vulnerable to its impacts. 4 million kids develop asthma across the world solely because their families live near major highways and roadways. Solely because of the air pollution challenges. It is time for us to rethink how we have crafted our world. We have to think about how we live within our natural resources, because I think we share a common goal. And I think everybody should be focused on this goal, which is that we should have the freedom in this country to be healthy. We have a right to be healthy. We have a right to be healthy. And if someone is taking away that right and we can't fix it ourselves, then that's what you have government to do. They stand up for people. They protect your rights. That's what it is all about, and we have to keep moving forward. It is time for us to protect in this country the most vulnerable, because it's not just about the developing world. It is about the developed world as well. It's about the United States, because we're not done yet. Sister, you mentioned how many people are continuing to be damaged by the lack of clean water. Need I say more than the word Flint to remind you of that? And that's kids, that's lead. Why haven't we fixed it yet? We have challenges here, huge amounts of money we need to invest, because while we cleaned ourselves up 60 years ago and 50 years ago at the first Earth Day, and we've been investing, those investments are almost as old as I am. Well, I pretended, I'm a little older. We have to reinvest. We have to think about what we need to do, because you know we have contaminants we're facing today that we never faced before. And we have to protect people from dirty air. We know how. We can't see it, but it's there. In many places we are beginning to see it again. And we're doing that without thinking about its consequences, because we're collectively taking action. Being collective does not mean you don't have individual moral authority and responsibility. We all do, and we all do together. And that's what we have to look at. Now, everybody comes up to me these days and says something like, "Oh, Gina, how are you?" Like I just dropped and they're picking me up. Listen, I realize that what's going on in Washington, D.C. is not pleasant for me. I feel like they don't share the same values that I do. I feel like they don't have the same, they're not speaking with the same moral authority that you'd want the leadership in the United States to have. And I know they're trying to roll back everything we ever did or thought about during the Obama administration, which is pretty much unprecedented because some of it is stuff that the industry thought was pretty good and doesn't want to be rethought. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to give up by being depressed and stick my head under the ground. That's it. When someone challenges me, I'm Irish, I'll go after you. So I wake up every morning, and my husband, who I'll be married to in a week for 40 years, whom I love dearly, this is how I wake up in the morning. I listen to his voice screaming and yelling at MSNBC. He says, Gina, can you believe this? You gotta see this, look what he said. So this is what I do. I go upstairs in the morning, I say, Ken, I love you dearly, but just shut up! We all have our problems. I realize things aren't going well, but would it be good to sit down, have a cup of coffee, think about all that's great in our lives? Think about the fact that I have a grandson, 7 months old, and he is the cutest child in the history of mankind. And if you don't believe me, I'll show you 25,000 photos, and I have one. You know, we have things to be thankful for. The minute you start off like that, that will be the end of your day. That'll be the last thing everybody wants to hear you say, because you will not be the Pied Piper of the environment if all you do is scream and yell about how awful it is. So get over it. You know, I tried this. I lied on the couch for 2 weeks after I got home trying to think of what am I going to do now after the Obama administration. And I decided I would catch up on 7 years of Games of Thrones. I had never had a chance to watch it. So I sat there, I grabbed about 25 gallons of ice cream, and I watched 7 years of Games of Thrones. And the only thing I gained from that experience was 15 pounds. So we have to think of something different, and we have to stop moping, and we have to stop focusing on what's going on in Washington. Because we don't have to. If you remember the first Earth Day, it wasn't the President of the United States calling everybody's attention to the environmental problems. It was a result of individuals like you and I in our own communities, in our own lives, saying, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. And everything that I know that has ever been dealt with in a successful way in the United States of America has started at the grassroots level. Everything. Name me anything and I will tell you I know the first person who said it, or the first community that drove it, or the first state that listened to those communities. This is how it works. This is called democracy. I don't want the federal government providing me leadership. I want them to follow what I want, what's been tested, what works, and then make everybody do it. Because it works for everybody. That's how it's supposed to work. So if the federal government in Washington isn't doing what you like, then you do what you like. Woo! You take over. You So that's why I'm at the School of Public Health, because it is all about public health. It is about people. The challenge we've had with climate change is you can't see it, feel it, and taste it. When we first realized that the climate was changing, frankly, the Reagan administration even admitted this. They just thought it would be 200, 300 years later. Well, it's not anymore. So let's get over it. Let's think about climate change. And let's stop talking about it as a challenge that is too big for any one of us to tackle. It is not. Because if each one of us tackled it, we'd be done already. We would be where we need to be. It is not hopeless. We have solutions today that are remarkable. And if everybody just took up what we already had available to us, we would be so much better off. And we'd be changing the signals to the market about what we need to do and when we need to do it. And that's what we need to do in the United States. We've always done it. We can do it with this. So we need to focus, and we need to recognize that great things are happening in this country no matter what anyone says in Washington, D.C. We have a clean energy system in this country. It is going like gangbusters. It is where more than 3 million jobs are right now. It is the fastest growing sector in our economy for jobs. It's called clean energy, renewable energy, energy efficiency. We started it here in the United States, right here in New England. We matched what was going on in California, and we need to keep plugging forward so that the rest of the country is beginning to understand it, because they are. Remarkable changes happening across the United States. It is not just the coast anymore. You know why people want renewable fuels? They're cleaner? Yup. They're healthier for us? You bet. But they're cheaper. The minute they're cheaper, I don't care what anybody in Washington says, we're done! It's a slippery slope and we're gonna win. So don't let anybody tell you that we can't make change in this country. Don't let anybody tell you that climate change isn't real. This is what I tell everybody at the School of Public Health, because I'm there to tell them how you speak English when you talk about science, and how we get information out to people and decision makers so that we can get things moving. This is what we do. Repeat after me. If someone says climate change isn't real, you have 3 things to say. Are we ready?
Yes.
Climate change is real.
Climate change is real.
Man-made emissions have caused it.
Man-made emissions have caused it.
Which is why women need to rule the world. It's true! What do you think is happening, folks? Did you see the 2018 election? All those young women are driving them crazy in Washington. This is not fun to watch. They're demanding change that we know we need to have. They're providing a voice. People across the United States are involved in mothers groups because they know that we've had bad messaging on climate change. We've talked about climate change as if it is about polar bears and glaciers. It may be, but they're not where I focus my attention. I focus my attention on my grandson. It's about my family. It's about your family. It's about our world. It's about our moral responsibility. It's about my grandson's future. In 2050, he's only going to be 35 years old. Do you really think that with my dying breath, I'm not going to do everything humanly possible to have that a future that I would want him to have? That's what we need to think of. We have to talk about it as personal. It is about us, and we personally have an obligation to address it. And if you look beyond what's happening, even in the States, you can see that democracy is waking up. It is waking up. How many times have you marched since the 50s and 60s? Not a lot. But we've been breaking out those bell-bottoms and those mattress t-shirts, and we have been marching. The Women's March was incredible. The Science March was outstanding. And now you have young people like the students at Parkland School who taught the rest of us what courage means, who taught the rest of us what persistence means, who taught me that a governor that I thought would never, ever sign a gun bill did because they demanded it. This is what democracy is about. So if I have any word to leave you with today, it is hope. We have to create our own future. We have to face the challenges we have today, and we have to do what every one of us have ever done for generations in this country, which is rely on science, move forward with solutions, and make things happen for the good of all of us. This is our shining moment. And if you think climate change isn't a public health problem, then you're just not looking close enough, because it is both the biggest public health challenge we face today, but also the most incredible opportunity. Money will be spent to address climate change. Let's make sure that those first dollars are spent on the health of those most vulnerable. When we do that,
we meet our moral obligation. When we do that, we build constituencies. We broaden engagement. We bring everybody into the tent. That's what we need to do. That's what I know you will do. And that's what all of us will do, not just because it's what my mom and dad taught me, but it's because what I know to be right. And my dad always used to say when I was a kid, and whining, which I hardly ever did. But I do remember what he used to say, so it must have been more than once. He used to say, Gina, can you just pull up your big girl pants and do something? So this is what I'm telling you. Pull up your big boy pants, your big girl pants, your gender neutral pants, and start moving!